it's more that we're trying to just get set up to have these canyon slices ready, to have the base drawing ready, and to have what we're calling those section scaffolds ready, so that we know where to put them and where to start building the model. So the workflow itself is a lot of like 2D information. We're not going to be going back into the 3D model as much as we are just going to set up for the model build. It's going to be a two-dimensional kind of workflow. So let's say that this is your drawing here, and I just did some kind of mock-up really quick straight line polylines in terms of this is the thing that we have on the wall today, and that's the sections, right? I've only got 3 here, but let's say that there's 11 of them all in here. What we want to do is we want to scale these up to be the size of the full scale drawing that you guys had before. So this is what we had, remember, like back in project 2D, yeah, where we sliced up your model, and after slicing up your model, we put it up there, and then we scaled it down to the 1/8 or the smaller size, right? So we're going to take this and we're going to scale up our section. I think one of my guys moved over, but that's okay. I've got a layer that's just called sections, my project sections right there. So I'm going to select those and I'm going to copy them. And you always want to use like a consistent reference point. I think a good one's always the bottom left box that we've got here. And I'm going to copy them over to the double size thing. So you can see my layers here are from before, the drawing double size and the drawing regular size and stuff like that. And I want to rescale these to fit into my bigger drawings. So I'm going to do the select last command, which is SEL last, and that's going to pick those curves, and I'm going to scale them. My origin point is that same bottom left corner right there, and my scale factor is 2. Right, so that's just going to pop those up there. The next thing that we're going to do, let me just make sure. Is that I want to close up any holes that I've got. I mean, what I mean to say by that is we want to be able to kind of treat this as our section scaffolds as like one piece, and that in order to do that, we want to come out of this with one closed line that we can use to set up. So, for instance, on one of a project like this right here, I've got this cross section that's happening, and I want to be able to have a scaffold that fits to these 2 pieces of the canyon that I can line up to it. The best way to do that is to close it up. So I've got a layer called closing lines, and this is going to be a matter of, in terms of for you, how do you want to work it, because we're trying to get as much access when we're model building from the top in there. Otherwise we would just cut like the hole out of the middle of this thing. But if you're kind of smart about it, what you can do is you can give yourself like a kind of setup to remind you what part of your model that you want to work with. So for instance, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 points here, right, in my model. If I want to be able to go down and work and connect to it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my closing line come up a little bit and go over and come down like that. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw what's called a bottom line. We're calling it that, and that basically is reminding me in this particular moment how wide my canyon bottom is. What that's doing is it's letting me later on set this thing up to tack on to when it's glued straight up like this. It'll allow me to attach it right to it. I just want to let you know that it can be tricky right now with the way that my graphics look. It looks like they're in the same spot as my borders, and if you're not sure about that, you can look and take off your borders or something like that for a second and just make sure that you go to the ends in the here. So I'm going to draw one from here to there. And the reason why I'm doing that is it's going to set up a bounding box. This bounding box is going to go up as high as I need and as wide as I need. So that command is under Analyze, Bounding Box. It wants to know what objects we're going to frame with the box, and it's going to be my cross section, my closing curve, and my bottom curve, like that. I've got some options here for what happens with the bounding box. I want my outputs to be curves. It says right now solids, but I want it to be curves. And coordinate system world, that's good. So I have my current layer be bounding box, and I hit OK. And that's created this orange box around the whole thing. So the last thing I'm going to do is I've got a layer called section scaffolds. And I'm going to use the curve boolean to get out of this kind of collection of geometry, just one closed curve that I can cut out by myself and use as the scaffold word. Okay, so that's going to be under curve boolean. Curve edit tools, curve boolean. I'm going to say delete input none, combine regions equals yes. I'm going to pick this curve, and my third curve. And it's going to tell me to click on regions to keep, and I'm going to click on here. And that's what I want to keep, and that's going to be what I cut out. So I hit say OK. And this new curve that I made is going to be on the section scaffolds layer, right? So that's the basic workflow for all of them. And if you want, what you can do is you can just like start to set aside, so you can get a gauge that if I do this 11 times, I'm going to have basically on my section scaffold layer, I'm going to have 11 of these that need to get cut and set up, and I'm going to have 11 sets of that, and that's my new stuff that's going to be on the vertical. So what I would do is just start to maybe set that aside here. If I select the objects on that layer and select these two, I can just start to copy those over to here. And then later on I can sort out how that I want to nest it out and either set up a template and cut it by hand or laser cutter, however that you cut it. The geometry on these are going to be relatively straightforward for your scaffolds because they're going to be straight lines because your sections are straight lines. So you're not going to have to deal with any kind of curvature on it. So you can definitely save some time probably if you can't get to the laser cutter is to hop on and just exactly those out. But that's the basic setup that we tried to draw over there as well. So if you can imagine these standing up made out of cardboard glued to the bottom of the base and then just clipping this on as a setup. And then what we start to do is we start to have nice spots. As you can remember, my cross section over here looked like that. So these are my corners that I'm going to start to connect with the wireframe stuff. So I've got these nice spots that I can start my model with. Yep. Good.
How would it work when you have like not that section cut, but like the other one that you drew that actually has a curve diagonally up?
Mm-hmm.
How would it work with something like that?
It worked the same way. This is actually the harder one because you kind of have to make something up. But on this one, you can just cap it off. So let's do this one. Just do another polyline, right? And for me, I try to just stay perpendicular to things. So I'm going to come over here and then go down to there, and that's going to be that line that I add. You want to make sure that you're just basically joined up there. And what that's doing is it's setting up to leave it open for the curve boolean. Then I'm going to do my bounding box. Oops, wrong objects. I skipped a spot. I need to set up the bottom line. Because all of these slices are different widths, I have to every time just do a bottom line on there. And remember, if you turn off the borders, it'll make your life a little easier with those. And now I can do my bounding box with this guy, and this guy. This will be the active layer, curves. Okay. And then I do the curve boolean on the layer for the section scaffolds. And those options will stay the same. So it's just going to be this one, and this one. And that's going to be my new scaffold that comes out of it. I'll just move it over here so you can see it for a second. Yeah. Yeah. So again, that's like, I would keep it as simple as possible. I think the one thing that you guys just want to keep an eye out for is that it's meant to make your life easier, you know, so kind of keep that in mind. This was my section, and I just want access to it. So I can create any kind of scaffold I want. We're kind of recommending the lowest and simplest because it lets you get your kind of hands in there and it still gives you access to the corner points. But if you have a better idea in terms of, well, I want to add an extra ridge here, or I want to build it higher, or whatever the case is, that's on a kind of case-by-case basis. Just kind of keep in mind that the lower these things are, the easier you'll be able to kind of access the model and things like that. And you'll be setting up like less boundaries along the way. But yeah, it's a good question. And you can kind of, it's like, for instance, this one, I would just do like a line straight across. You know, what happens down here is also kind of important too. So I'm going to have my shift on, and I'll let that intersect happen perpendicular and then come down. You just want to make sure that these two curves touch each other on the ends, because that way the Boolean, curve Boolean will work. It'll treat it like a closed curve. The bounding box is just a shortcut to get us to the smallest possible one. You could also just like draw a rectangle that size once that's there. Just trying to. The bounding box always guarantees the smallest kind of box on that. Yeah. So that's the kind of setup for all the vertical ones. That's like half of the story right there on the setup on this, and it's kind of the most work really. The other one, and you should already have these lines, so it's not too bad. The other one is just to set up the base. So this is kind of an unfinished version, but a kind of geometrically, this is what we had with 2D, right? It's this thing that's the size of your physical quarter scale model. So we kind of just need to do is bring it up to something that looks like that. It's going to print out like this, right? And you're gonna attach it, you know, spray mount it flush on the MDF, because that way we can guarantee no matter how long your kind of slices happen into here, we'll still know what sections you are. So with that one, you just want to, the kind of first thing that you want to do is you want to reduce it down to the 11 sections that you need, right? So that's a matter of, I can take, this is my Make 2D version that I then brought into Illustrator, but you can kind of start to bring this down and take away the ones you don't need, and I've got that kind of done. Here with these kinds of sections, it kind of lets you know these are the ones that I picked going out. They're corresponding to whatever ones that you drew. So you can already see that this drawing is going to be a little bit simpler than that. So that's scaled out without it. What I'll do is I'll just take these curves, and I'm going to scale them out without the border, because we're going to do a new border for it, this big outside border. So I'm just going to make a copy of this so you can see the workflow. So this is going to scale up by 2, factor of 2, like that. And we'll do a new border that's 1.5 inches away. So I'm going to use curve offset. My distance is going to change to be 1.5 inches. So I'm going to do 1.5 and go out with it. That should be enough for our flags to fit in here. But unfortunately, because we scaled up the flags themselves, and that's going to be on that layer. the flags got bigger too. So, but we wanted them to, it had to scale up so they'd be in the right spot for our 11 sections. So we do want to like just scale these down and fit them into the border like this, sorry, like here. And that's basically all I did, and it's pretty quick. It's just rescaling and moving it. These are, again, I do the control points, and if I want to rescale the flag, I just grab the control points and use the scale command. Use this little corner as the origin point and type 0.5. It'll just rescale it. And while I'm at it, I can move it in. So if I got this near snap on, I can just grab it and snap for it to be in there. Yeah. And you can just kind of scale it. So if I turn, the quick way to do it is to turn your control points all on at the same time. And that way you can just go by and run the scale command over and over again as the last command. And it remembers that the last time you scaled something, it was by half. So you don't have to re-enter it a bunch of times. You can just do that. And the move is not technically a command, it's a drag. So when I hit space again, it has to scale again. So it'll cut it out pretty quick. You can start to do this. And because I've already turned on my control points, I don't have to keep running that control point command anymore. So that can turn this into pretty quick. So that's what I did. I brought it over there. These were numbers just to me to kind of remember what sections I was working on at the time when I went and picked them out and compared them to this up here. So this is what 11 would look like. And basically, this is ready to go out into Illustrator. And you're going to use the same line weights and numbers as before for you remember your smaller version of it. So those, whatever those line weight value are, and we've got those, you've got them already written up and set up. I think it's like 0.5 for the topo lines or something like that in black. And the numbers themselves, you can just copy over and put on your flags here. And that part of the drawing, after you do that line work stuff in Illustrator, it's going to be ready. Yeah. And good to go. Just make sure when you print it that no scaling happens or anything like that, because you'll already have a piece of MDF it has to fit to. But you guys are pretty good with that already. Any questions? Yep. More like Rhino specific, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we put the flags inside the drawing, or it's fine to put it on the board?
We're putting them on the border like this, because that way we'll be able to see them a little bit easier. You're going to have a lot of stuff going on in your model. You're going to have like stuff glued up, and you might have to add some supports and who knows, you know. And it'll be a little bit easier for people looking at your model to be able to see the section cut from along the way. So I would just try to get it basically in the middle there. And obviously when you get into these kinds of situations, you got to use your best judgment to nudge it around a little bit. Yeah.
So the cardboard's going to line up with the line pretty much.
Say that again, sorry.
Cardboard's going to line up.
Yeah, so yeah, you know, depending on how your thing got cropped, you're going to have a piece of cardboard sitting on it like around right here.
Are we centering the cardboard, or are we sticking one side onto that line?
You're centering the cardboard, so your kind of registration is going to be the bottom of the valley here, where you've got those two pieces. This is the 2 points that you can use to center it. That's why we're not doing the full ones, just because it's gonna create lots more intersections, and with these big, it'd be nice to have, but you could basically just have less ability to reach into your model. So that's why we're using these kinds of cropped sections versus the full sections. But yeah, so your registration, the way that you kind of know where to place these things is by having this bottom topo line up with it. Yep. Any other questions? These are good. Yep.
Well, since some of our actual lines are going to be crossing over each other, do we have to cut our cardboard accordingly to that? So like if we have one section that's like this,
doing this, right?
It's like this.
They're hitting each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just have to slice off that one section, and then that's the area, or do we kind of have to have
I'd say it's a case-by-case basis on that. You know, you want to kind of look and see how much you need to cut off and how much it affects the model. If it's only a small slice, right, that's one thing that you might not have to do. You always want to check with the instructor on it. But, you know, in terms of the graphic, it's going to be, there's so much of a range, there's no great answer for that. I mean, when look at some of my smaller guys here, do you know what I mean? It's like some of these little ones they're not going to be much cardboard at all, right? And that's a different case than if you've got some of these larger ones. So it's going to be on a kind of case by case basis. But the good thing is, like, it's kind of structurally nice to have these intersections to cut them and then reattach them, because all of a sudden now you're getting something like with a better base than leaving it off, right? Yeah, you're going to have more connection points. So it's going to start to lattice up on you, and it's going to have some kind of stronger connections. It's going to want to stay standing more.
Going back to, I don't know if it would be case by case. On mine, since it's a complete S, I have sections that end up having 3 hills within the exact same section cut. So what I end up having to duplicate and cut it to fixate through the whole topo.
Shorten the section.
Mm-hmm. So
I think that
we can
this
talk
is-
about individual kind of cases,
Yeah.
but in terms of the recording and stuff, are there any Rhino questions before we stop it on that, and then we'll talk about the model after that. But the Rhino stuff's okay. Okay, let me stop that so we can talk